This podcast was produced by Sean Weston Media.
I'd like to talk about comms teams and insight. It's a little vague, this one.
It's very vague. What do you mean by insight? Well,
insight could mean a number of things. It could be clairvoyance. Wouldn't that be fun, actually? Instead of hiring a masseur to come every Friday to rub your shoulders, you hire a medium to tell you if you're going to be made redundant.
Or you go down to the seaside and pay your £1.
Madam Microsoft.
That little paperclip pops up.
No, I'm thinking, I suppose, of things like interdepartmental insight, sharing of knowledge and information, and what comms teams are responsible for. How do they get involved in that? Where are they in the link, the chain?
I'd say they're a big deal. I think comms people are in a really good position to provide good insight on how people are feeling in an organisation. And also on the communications themselves. We send hundreds of things out a year. We're communicating constantly. It's an obsession with all organisations, and internally and externally. We're communicating more and more and more in different ways, different channels. So hopefully some of those channels just give you a little bit more back. So in the bygone days of sending out emails, it's pretty tough to track or provide any insight of whether people have read it or not. We're now in a position with lots of different tools that can just give us that data, and then it's our job to look at it and provide some insight. So it's not data, is it? It's about understanding trends and understanding what things mean.
Yeah, so we're talking about company surveys and things like that?
Yeah, it could be, but it could be software that tracks how many people are opening the email, how long they're spending on it, what sort of topics people are interested in town hall meetings, and the sorts of questions that you're getting, or the tone of the questions, and actually looking at, what insight can you gather from how people feel at that time.
So what we're talking about is the comms team having that insight, but that not keeping it to themselves, actually doing something with it that changes the company.
And also showing, surely this is the next stage, this is you showing a bigger value than as a post person of someone sending something out. This is you showing what value you bring back to the organisation so that they can change and adapt and do better.
So insight always has to be a two-way process.
Yeah, I think so.
But you mentioned there as well that it's not just about necessarily what's happening within the company and getting the feedback on that from surveys, but it's also about keeping up with industry trends, what people are doing outside of the business, and analysing that and then putting it out there in a way that everyone can understand.
And even going as far as just adapting what you're doing based on what you're seeing outside as well.
What do you mean by that?
So if you take another organisation that's doing something fantastic and they share what they're doing and you think it's good and it'll work for you, then put it in place, give it a go, and then track how it's doing. So if there's a new tool or a new way of talking about something, or it's something people are not talking about at all in your organisation, why not bring that in, but use that insight that you've gathered to make some changes?
Do you think we do that enough?
No, I don't think anyone does that enough. I think you get sat in your bubble, don't you, if something works well for you, and that's what we're going to do.
Yeah, that comfort zone of, or maybe even that hubris of we do it best. So why should we be looking at other competitors? We do it best.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's definitely that thing where habits die hard, don't they? If an organisation's got a newsletter that they've had forever and people say they love it, but actually when you get the tool that measures it, you realise no one's actually reading it.
Hey, we talked recently about remote fatigue. Do you remember that episode? Do you think there's such a thing as insight fatigue?
Oh, probably. There's too much data, there's too much information. But isn't that someone doing their job well when they can interpret it and provide solutions with it? Sometimes you need insight to help you stop doing something as much as you need to start do something.
So are we good at sharing information? We might have a lot of information, but are we good at then applying it across different teams and departments?
I doubt it. I think most organisations are probably all collecting all sorts of data and information, and they're presenting it in their own way, and they're maybe not having those conversations amongst themselves. They're maybe presenting it up to show off what they can do. But it would be good to have internal comms working with HR and working with finance to actually bring some of that information together. I suspect when you invest in really big structural tools, say like a new HR system or a new finance system, you may get HR and finance working together to, to talk about workforce planning or to understand a little bit more about costs and where things could be more efficient.
But they're possibly only doing that when the project comes up rather than on a consistent basis.
Yeah, perhaps.
Yeah.
What about marketing? What more can marketing do? Who can they work with? Because they collect a lot of data, don't they?
Traditionally, I've always thought that marketing and sales team should be hand in hand. They should always be, if you like the office environment, they should always be the departments next to one another, in my opinion. Marketing should hear the calls that are being made by the sales team, and the sales team should understand what the marketing team are doing as well. They're so closely linked to lead generation, getting business in.
But what about HR and how they link into that then? Because you're collecting all this insight, this information. Shouldn't that impact the type of people that you want to hire or the skills that you need to do better in that? So the insight's telling you that we need to start, moving to a 100% digital model. Actually, we've got 80% of our people that know nothing about digital. That's where your insight gets used for recruitment, doesn't it?
Yes.
And that's where it gets used for business strategy, because actually the business needs a new operating model. It needs a different way of working. All this sort of feeds together.
Now, how does that work then? So say you got that information and you've analysed it and thought, this is a good thing for our business. Whose job is it to then implement that?
I guess it's the leadership team of that organisation, and most would have some way of sucking that information up, I guess, some hierarchical way of pulling that information to the top.
Who then tries to link all the departments that are associated with it together, and then the comms team puts out that constant message of what's being done each week, each
I think
day.
in theory, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, theories. I have a good theory to end this episode.
Go on.
I wonder if I can fit another croissant in before lunchtime.